So, who is MGX? Let's start there.
Yeah, it's kind of the new kid on the block. It was started about a year ago by the UAE, and it's a joint venture basically between their sovereign wealth fund called Mubadala and this AI company called G42. And so they've both put in money to this fund, and it's effectively pouring billions into data centers, chips, OpenAI, XAI. It's sort of investing all across the AI spectrum really rapidly.
And so, in terms of where this money comes from, you said it's the sovereign wealth fund is one source of the capital. G42, where does their money come from?
Yeah, well, G42 was originally set up by the UAE, but it also has outside backers. It has Silver Lake, which is a big tech-focused private equity firm here in the US. Ray Dalio, the former leader of the hedge fund Bridgewater, is also an investor. So
Right.
you see this kind of cross-pollination happening.
Okay, so they have a lot of money to deploy. You also wrote about how they've become a giant in the data center financing game. Tell us about some of the projects that MGX is backing.
Yeah, they're doing sort of two things. One, they're investing big in data center companies. So, what we revealed in this story is basically that they're going to be the largest shareholder in this company called Aligned Data Centers
Hmm.
that struck a record $40 billion deal this year to be sold to a consortium that includes MGX, among other investors. So they're investing in companies like Aligned, Vantage Data Centers is another one. And then they're going to places like France and Italy and doing joint ventures with local companies to build data centers there, really huge ones of a gigawatt or more. So they're doing a few different things, but suffice to say, they're trying to build a really huge data center portfolio that's also global, not just in the UAE.
And so, one of the questions I wanted to ask you about is the US government has been so sensitive right now to keeping AI domestic. I wonder, as it relates to at least data center projects in the US, I mean, has there been any sort of increased scrutiny around where the money comes from for these data center projects and whether or not it's coming from outside of North America?
Yeah, it's possible that this aligned acquisition will trigger what they call a CFIUS review to look at basically whether MGX would have control over aligned. That's a normal thing to do when any international investor comes in big into a US company. But the stance from the administration seems to basically be that they're welcoming money of any kind to build data centers and AI infrastructure in the US, as long as it's green.
Right.
UAE has pledged $1.4 trillion of spending in the US over the next decade. Saudi Arabia just pledged a trillion itself. I don't know that we would have seen this under the Biden administration, but the Trump administration certainly is welcoming that money.
And I wonder, as it relates to these data center projects, we obviously know that the big public tech companies are involved in those efforts. We also know that the fast growing startups, in quotes, the giants, OpenAI and Anthropic, they are certainly becoming part of the story. And look, they have their own fundraising needs, which that's one way that companies like MGX could get involved. Um, could MGX also get involved in their data center projects a bit? Could the relationship at all get closer over the coming months?
Yeah, these investments that they're making in Aligned and Vantage in particular are going to draw them a lot closer to both the big tech companies and OpenAI. So Aligned works very closely with some of the largest cloud companies, think Amazon, Microsoft, Google,
Got
to
it.
build data centers for them. So that will sort of deepen the ties between the UAE and those companies. And then Vantage is actually really closely linked to OpenAI and Oracle through the Stargate project. Vantage is building at least three sites in Texas, Wisconsin, and Michigan for Oracle to provide OpenAI with cloud services. So, it's really kind of getting closer to these important AI companies
Hmm.
through data center investments.
Let me ask you a bit of a more broader question, your own reflections on the data center space. Look, we have all these companies. We've talked about some companies like Crusoe, for example, on the show. We haven't talked too much about Aligned and certainly about Vantage as much. You have studied these data center companies and the ways in which they're growing, some of the risks that obviously we've talked about the debt. I haven't even really paid attention to the founders, the people who are building the company on the ground. I wonder if you have any broader reflections on the people building these businesses. I mean, or do they have sort of an affinity for these really large scale, capital expensive businesses? Are they sort of a different type of entrepreneur? Just talk to me a little bit what you've learned about these companies.
Yeah, well, fundamentally, data centers are real estate. So I think it's important to think of these people as really real estate, um, investors and real estate builders. And what's sort of remarkable when you talk to them is how quickly they're having to adapt to the needs of these tech companies that suddenly want a gigawatt of power at their data centers, whereas before 100 megawatts would have been sufficient.
Hmm.
A lot of these companies are owned by private equity funds after being taken private because they weren't very attractive publicly traded companies. They had a lot of debt. Public investors couldn't quite understand them. And so what we're seeing now, I think, is these companies trying to reposition with this new growth coming from these huge AI demands to try to find a way to either go public or like Aligned, be acquired at a really nice multiple,
Hmm.
and sort of take advantage of this AI boom in the way that any sort of startup founder would. They're having to sort of go into hyper growth after being in kind of a normal growth phase, if you will,
Hmm.
for many years.
It is kind of funny to me that as we talk about debt, I mean, look, and I'm not equating this bubble with the 2008 bubble by any means, but look, that was fundamentally at some points about real estate and about mortgages. Here we have a similar group of people that are getting involved in these data center efforts. And look, we're not calling the top of the bubble. We're not saying it's going to be as catastrophic, but real estate, I mean, gosh, it's kind of what everything somehow comes back to at the end of the day.
Real estate is hard. And maybe in the end that it's supply chain issues, power procurement issues that put a cap on the bubble or uh, pop the bubble, however you want to sort of view it.
Yeah,
Yeah, in the end, it's real estate, and as you said, it's the debt because this
right.
stuff is all very expensive, and the funding mix is going more and more towards debt over time.
Great. Well, Miles, thanks for coming on the show. It's not a company that we have talked about a lot yet, but I anticipate we're going to have more news to come. And so we'll bring you back on when there is. That is Miles Kruppa, our AI and finance reporter here at The Information.